Hi, everyone. It is so amazing to be here. This is my first in-person conference and only second conference presentation ever. And it's been really amazing hearing a lot of these talks, meeting some amazing people, and just the general knowledge sharing that's been going on these past few days. It's been really incredible. And I'm so happy to be a part of it. Today, I'm going to be talking about a recent project that I've been working on. It's kind of a segue into talking about some design concepts of the developer tools spaCy and Prodigy that I think are honestly super powerful in enhancing developer productivity for everyone from the coding newbies to the advanced and complicated project teams. Before we start on the content, I'll give a short introduction about myself. So I'm Victoria. I'm a developer advocate for Explosion, as mentioned. We are the makers and maintainers of spaCy, which is a tool for natural language processing pipelines and projects, and also Prodigy, which is a scriptable annotation tool. So I've been working with Explosion for about 10 months now. I started just after I graduated university. My academic background is in purely linguistics, so I'm a self-taught developer, and it's been super amazing learning from all the amazing people at Explosion and growing my skills there. One of those amazing coworkers is Vincent. He's been working with me on this project. He does a ton of cool stuff within Explosion and a lot of also recreational programming, as he calls it, which has resulted in a bunch of amazing libraries and cool projects like this one. So in this talk, we're going to go through Vincent and I's personal frontpage project, a project we came up with to provide daily updates of new things going on topics that you in particular are interested in. So first, we'll talk about our annotation experience with this project, getting the data and creating a custom Prodigy recipe to make annotating the dataset easier. And then we'll go into building the spaCy models and how that all worked. And finally, we'll end up how you can build your own personal front page, and I'll go through some future project plans and final thoughts at the end, since this is still kind of a work in progress. I'm going to use our process of building this project to talk about some of the cool things that spaCy and Prodigy do that I think are super interesting and impactful for the developer experience. Before we get into the project, I just want to quickly introduce spaCy and Prodigy for those who aren't familiar with the libraries. So spaCy is a natural language processing Python library, as I mentioned. We provide pre-trained models and also pipeline building blocks to do all sorts of natural language processing related tasks, like NER, text categorization, and a bunch of linguistic-y stuff as well. So you can train your own models on your own data using spaCy, or you can also use our pre-trained models as well to do projects and build applicational NLP pipelines. So you can assemble your natural language processing pipeline with the specific components you want, and that's because spaCy is built using a modular architecture. So you can put in the components that make sense for your project without having any unnecessary steps or functionalities. In the left box of the slide here, we have an excerpt from our config file, which is the building block of spaCy's modular pipeline architecture. So by updating the config, you can easily swap out some components for others, but we also provide defaults for everything. So you can use the out-of-box solution to easily get started and then iterate as you go. And I'll go into more of this in the spaCy section of the talk. So moving on to Prodigy, you can see a screenshot from our online demo here. And as I mentioned, Prodigy is an annotation tool. But what makes it cool is, like spaCy, it also provides the ability for extensive customizability while also maintaining sensible default solutions. You'll see this is kind of a theme in this talk. We provide a lot of different recipes for annotation out of the box, like NER, text categorization, relation extraction, and a ton more. However, as I'll show you with the front page project, Prodigy is also super easy to customize using your own Python functions. Meaning you can do things like add custom HTML, create functions that run before you save data to the database, or add help text like annotation guidelines directly to the interface. And so now the project. The project takes data from arXiv, which is, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a website with a ton of academic papers on different topics. When Vincent initially came up with the idea for this project, he noticed that queries on arXiv wouldn't necessarily give him the information he wanted. So, for example, if we were looking for papers about new data sets, searching for data sets sometimes gives you methods for data extraction or evaluation metrics or other unrelated papers. So this got us thinking, what if we could create a machine learning solution to find these papers related to, say, new data sets, and then also display these in a daily updated web page? We could then keep up with new things happening, and in theory, have different topics and different sources to kind of create your personalized front page without having to rely on things like Twitter. So we've created this project in a way that you can update it with your own data, train your own models on topics that you want to see in your front page, and we'll go through this in the third section of this talk. We do plan on expanding this project more with topics and new features soon, but I'll walk you through kind of the current status of the project in a bit. So with that, let's start on the first part of the project, the data annotation. So as I mentioned, we're using the archive PyPy library, which connects to the archive API to pull papers directly from archive itself. So we're using a search query. You can see that at the top here. We're searching the titles for datasets, corpus, or database, or the abstract for the string in your dataset. We're then taking all the results and putting it in a JSON-L file with the title, the description, which is the abstract, and tags, which we have here, archive and dataset, and also a meta tag, which just has a search query in it. This will allow us to do text classification on the data using the tags. And yeah, so this is the dataset class, which will be our main example for today. So when we started annotating this dataset, we noticed that it was taking a lot of time to skim the abstracts and find the part where it said it was actually about a new dataset. The abstract can be kind of long, and the title of the paper can sometimes be misleading. So I found that you did actually need to go through the entire abstract to figure out whether it was about a new dataset or not. So this got us thinking, always a good question, is there a way to do this better? So we decided to speed up the process by using spaCy matcher patterns. And you can see an example of our dataset matcher pattern at the bottom of the screen there. So within the abstract, there is usually a single or a couple sentences that says something like, we introduce a new dataset about blah, or we introduce the RGB Arabic alphabet sign language dataset. And this was common across a lot of examples. So by using the spaCy matcher patterns, we were able to highlight these and match these examples where it said this. And then we could put this in the annotation interface, more easily skim the abstracts, and have more consistent results with the annotation, and also easier annotation process. So we implemented this using a spaCy matcher component, and I'm just going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. I'm a big proponent of including rule-based solutions to enhance your machine learning pipeline. And including rules to make your data annotation better is definitely a great way to do this. So building rules means you have to understand the data you're working with directly, right? And in my mind, this is essential to machine learning projects. I talked about a lot this in a recent blog post I worked on in a project where I combined rules with machine learning to create a better pipeline from everything from the data quality to the evaluation scores. When we're building machine learning pipelines, I think this is something we forget a lot. It's really important to understand every single part of the process. And that definitely includes your data. Because writing rules really requires you to understand what's being fed into your machine learning models in your entire project, it's a great way to ensure consistency, lay a good foundation, and ensure quality. In this project, we use rules to ensure annotation consistency by making it easier for annotators to catch things that they might otherwise have missed. So we're able to iterate our rules, create an iterative pipeline workflow instead of a linear one, as we gain more experience with our data, and in turn, this makes our whole pipeline process better. So, in order to provide this highlight matching features and others, we made our own custom Prodigy text categorization recipe. When I first started this project, I hadn't really worked with custom Prodigy recipes before, and it really, really amazed me how simple it was to get started with one, and then keep building upon it to customize it further. So this is what our recipe looks like currently. You can see here in our box, we have custom HTML, and this makes the title bigger. And then we also have highlighted the match patterns within the abstract just by using the highlight tag within HTML and the bold tag as well. We're also displaying the link with HTML at the bottom in case the annotator needs to see the paper in full to make a further decision, which I have found is really helpful in some cases. So within the custom Prodigy recipes, you can also implement sorters. Within this recipe, we set a flag that when it's set as true, it will prefer entries with a matched pattern. And this allows us to annotate more examples that are relevant for our project, and to utilize the matcher to make the process easier and better. As you may have saw in a few slides ago, we also provided a meta tag within the data itself to provide the search query for archive, and this just provides more transparency for the annotator as well. All of this is done through a Python function, so you can write it yourself, include it in your project, and it's super simple. We provide examples and descriptions of this all in our Prodigy docs, and always go to our support if you need any help with this. We're always around. So for our data annotation, we definitely could have used a lot of solutions out of the box for text classification, right? It's not a very complicated problem. You're just saying whether it is or is not. However, because Prodigy provided us with the tools to make customizations easily, we were able to create a good annotation experience, one that made it easier for us to go through examples and annotate them correctly and consistently. We market Prodigy as a scriptable annotation tool, and interface where you have the power to make adjustments that fit to your projects. And what we've done with this front page project is just a small piece of what's actually possible. We've recently done a couple blog posts about companies like The Guardian, who have customized Prodigy super extensively and powerfully. In this diagram, you can see all the customizations that The Guardian did to their annotation interface. We have quite a few here, I think A through H. The annotators were able to, they were able to place their annotation guidelines directly within the Prodigy interface. If you can see there, A, so the annotators could review them if they were ever confused on how to annotate something without needing to leave the web browser. They also customized colors and theme, removed buttons, and added custom labels. They added custom flagging components, where an example could be flagged for further review, and also feedback bots, where the annotator could leave descriptions or questions on the example as well. This leads me to the first point I'd really like to emphasize. By putting power in the hands of the developer, Prodigy enhances your experience. Customizable solutions enhance the developer experience. So before I start talking about how we trained a model and all this awesome data we now have, I'll introduce the power behind spaCy's models, the config system. We introduced the config system in the version 3 release of spaCy, and this solution to balancing ease of use with customizability really, really amazes me. The config file can sometimes look a little scary, especially if you're new to development, which it was for me, for sure. But I promise it's not as scary as it looks, and once you understand the mechanisms behind it, you'll realize that it's incredibly powerful and helpful in the model building and training process. Basically, there's a config file for each pipeline you build within spaCy. The file has all the settings for your pipeline and each component individually, none of it hidden behind any abstraction layers. Everything is there in the config by default. Everything is visible with reasonable default values as well. This means, though, that because everything is in that one file, you can change settings in your pipeline simply by swapping out lines in your config. For example, here's an excerpt from our TextCat multi-label config. Right now, it's using all the default settings, like the spaCy tokenizer and the multi-label scorer for TextCat. However, if you wanted to swap out, let's say the scorer for your own custom solution, you simply change that line in the config, you register it within the registry in your Python file, and that's it, you train your model. To start off, we have a training quick start guide that will generate a default config with all your recommended settings. So for this project, we're using all the default settings to start, so that our config is exactly how it's generated by the quick start. As I mentioned, though, if we ever need to change anything going forward, this is super easy to adjust for any further solutions we might need within this project. Training a spaCy model, again, is super easy with the general settings. With the spaCy train command, we simply pass in our config that we generated, pass the train and test sets, an output location, and then we wait for a model. We can then load this directly from the source with spaCy load in our Python file. So for this project, we're using the TextCat multi-label spaCy model. For this, we give it labeled data with categories. So you saw earlier the data set, and we also have another one, prompt engineering on archive, which we're using as well. So these two categories are for the model, and we take them TextCat model, and the TextCat model will assign new data and assign predictions for both categories, including it in the correct place on the front page, or excluding it if it's determines it's not one of those categories. So you can see here the where data set is seen to be a data set. Our threshold is 0.5 for this project, so 0.75 definitely passes. or 7.9 definitely passes. Prompt engineering does not pass for this data set, it's 0.2, so that will be excluded out of the prompt engineering section, but included in the data set section. Right, and so for the Prodigy section, I talked a lot about customizability and the power that brings in the hands of the developer. In the spaCy section of this talk, I kind of went on the other end of the spectrum. We're using the out-of-the-box solutions here, right? We're using the defaults and the pre-configured building blocks, and that makes it super easy to hit the ground running. No customizations are needed. We're just using the solutions. And this is also super important. Having default solutions to things means it's easy to get started and try things out without the overhead of having to put a ton of effort in to get things set up. As important as customizability is, so is not being overwhelmed with options and having these default values as a starting point to build your project off of. So in order to make this a complete and reproducible project, we're using the spaCy project system. And I know I'm a bit biased, but I really, really love the system. It makes it super easy to create and share projects and tutorials. And I don't have too much time to go into this right now, but I'm just going to give you a little taste, and then you can go to the docs and look at this more. At the heart of the project system is the project.yaml file. Here you'll find information on commands, project structure, and workflows, and we're definitely utilizing this a lot in our front page projects. So in the front page project.yaml, we have all the commands for downloading data, pre-processing it, annotating it, training a model, compiling the output, and then building the front page. This would be a lot to normally remember if you had to do all this by scratch, so we've set up a simple workflow that you could simply just have to run spaCy project run new front page, and it does it all for you, which is amazing. And behind the scenes, this is an excerpt from the project YAML for the download command, and you can see that it's just running a command in the bash terminal that's using our scripts function and passing in arguments. So how can you create your own custom front page? Well, the first step is to find the GitHub repo. I have put the link here. Then you can find your personal front page config under the config folder, and I have that in the lower left-hand corner there. So here you can set section topics, set settings, change the description. Right now we're experimenting with 2 topics, data sets on archived and prompt engineering on archives. You can see all the settings for those there. So this is kind of the mechanism behind building the front page with your own custom settings. And hopefully we'll be able to expand this soon with some more topic-changing functionality. As for the deployment of the front page, we're using GitHub Pages to automatically download data new day, every day, and then update the page. So by changing the download command in the project.yaml, the spaCy project.yaml, you can then adjust the project and the source. And hopefully, again, I'll make this easier and put this all in the config file for the front page, but future plans. So once the data is downloaded, GitHub Pages will also automatically pre-process, train a new model, generate the content stream with the model and data, and then populate the front page. This sounds like a lot, but it's actually just running spaCy project run new front page at GitHub behind the scenes. So again, the spaCy project system has really made it nice to incorporate all these commands and run them reproducibly, automatically every day. So basically, if you want to customize your front page, you simply need to annotate some data on a topic that you want, adjust the tags, adjust the settings, and yeah, that's it. For now, you can definitely check out the GitHub repo, stay updated with new things coming. We have a lot of plans. You can also visit the deployment page for my front page. This is kind of what it looks like right now. So when you click on one of the papers, it pops down with a box. It has the classes, the abstract, and a link to the paper. So it definitely works right now, which is pretty cool. So as I mentioned, this project is still a bit of a work in progress. I'm super excited to continue working with Vincent on this. We have a ton of plans, including make it easier to change topics, upload your own data, and customize different parts of the pipeline. I will be working on a better evaluation system next, as well as reconfiguring some of the configs to make it easier to set up your own topics. Up next, I thought I'd mention Vincent is working on a super cool text classification trick. So in a nutshell, we decided that doing text classification on the entire abstract was maybe an approach that could be improved a bit. So he'll be experimenting with breaking the abstract up into sentences and then doing text classification on the individual sentences. So if you remember from the matcher patterns, there was usually just 1 or 2 sentences that really made or break the text classification. And if we can find this, there may be a way to be more efficient and also accurate with our predictions. So hopefully he'll give a talk soon with some of his thoughts on the process, so definitely look out for that. And then also for future plans, we're thinking about supporting a spaCy matcher instead of a spaCy model, so you could use this without having to annotate your own data and just set matcher patterns instead of training your own model. Also more built-in models as well. And then we also want to do an A/B Prodigy classification interface so that it can kind of learn what your interests are. So you can say, yes, I like this more than this one, and then it will learn what your interests are as well and be able to give you more tailored solutions or tailored papers. OK, so spaCy was one of the first libraries I ever used when I was just starting out with Python and knew basically nothing. I started with the defaults, using simply the built-in components. And as I've learned more and grown my skills as a developer, spaCy has allowed me to expand and make more complicated projects with custom components. And the same with Prodigy. When I started with Explosion, I experimented with the built-in recipes, annotating data. When my needs started to expand for different projects, I was able to dive deeper into the product and utilize different capabilities that ultimately made my project better and enhanced my experience as a developer. This spectrum is, I think, really hard to balance in developer tooling, but I also think it's something that can be super impactful if it's done right. On one hand, you have to make it easier to get started so that users don't have to put a ton of time into trying out the solution. You have to have ease of use, pre-configured building blocks, and good defaults. And then on the other hand, you have to make the library adaptable and configurable so it can grow with the development needs of a project. You need to have it compatible with advanced workflows for modern NLP and machine learning. spaCy and Prodigy, I think, are both really able to do this, and it amazes me every time I work with them. And I know I'm a bit biased, but this is by far my favorite feature of the developer tools, and I'm always so excited when I see this in other places as well. Adaptable tooling doesn't have to be complex to start, and built-in components don't have to remain stagnant. Giving power to the developer to make decisions and customize the project and pipelines, I believe, ultimately results in more robust solutions and a better development experience. Again, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to rant about things that make me excited. I think we have some time for questions, but you can also find me around the conference or at these various links to going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That was a very fascinating talk. Well done. We have a few questions on Slido. So Sebastian wants to know, do you think the project would scale to generic news aggregation?
That's a good question. I think generic news might be a little hard. We do have plans for like Hacker News and Reddit integrations. I think the main part would be the scraping and like the API for like generic news. And I don't know if that's something we're necessarily interested in building, which might influence that as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Would be cool though.
Would be cool.
Someone, please iterate over that. Sebastian also had a question that I would have asked myself as well. Can you give us a live demo of your front page?
Yes, I can. Maybe. Yes, there it is.
Nice.
So this is the front page project. You can see here we have data sets on archive and then prompt engineering on archive. So we can just look at some examples here. Let's see. A data set for exploring dependency relations between events. So you can see here, our text classification model is still not doing really well. This is definitely a room for like improvement that we want. It's like giving 0.55 accuracy to this, even though it seems like is about a data set. In prompt engineering, we don't have enough data for this yet, so it still needs to improve a bit. But yeah, so and then you can go to link, and yeah, that's that.
Cool. As a former academic, I would have killed to have a front page like this, to be honest. Okay, so I know. It's too late for me. It's not too late for you. Okay, next question. Is it possible to use third-party models or algorithms for data classification? For example, Hugging Face transformers or even self-written?
We can definitely build this functionality into the project. We don't have it yet in there because it's pretty tied to building the spaCy model in the. But you could definitely change just the workflow in the spaCy project system to include your other model besides the spaCy model, and it would work perfectly fine. So this, the way we built this is very modular, so you can definitely swap out and swap in different parts of the pipeline.
Cool. Next question. Is topic modeling something that you considered for the front page? The papers might fit together in various ways. Thanks for the great talk.
Topic modeling. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely. Yes. We will see.
Right. Yeah, but fits the scope pretty well.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Yeah. So someone was just asking where we can find slides to your talk.
I will post them. So if you go to explosion-events, you can see all our events. And once I have them downloaded, I will post them right here.
OK, great.
Yeah.
Does anyone in the room have questions? Just raise your hand, and I'll bring over the mic to you. You're keen. Going once. OK, there you go.
In the config file, you specify that the language is English. Is it possible to predict the language of text when you have a bunch of text you don't know the language they are going to be in?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely do that with another spaCy model and just include that in your project pipeline. But you wouldn't be able to do it out of the box with this solution right now. I think that most of the papers on arXiv are in English, so I think we are using an English spaCy model for those papers, and it just would not work for a project that wasn't in, or for a paper that wasn't in English. But you could definitely do it with other spaCy models.
Right. Any other questions? OK, going once, going twice. OK, thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you
well
all
done.
so much. It's been amazing.
Fantastic talk.